Impeached Judge President of the Western Cape John Hlophe has no regrets following his removal from office. This as he reflected on his legal career from being the golden boy in the legal profession to a former judge stripped of his status and former glory. SABC News senior reporter Canny Maphanga sat down with Dr. John Hlophe as he reflected on this journey documented in his memoir, Defying the Gallows.
Well, my life, the book encompasses my whole story, how I started, the schools that I went to, and I think I did very well at school. One thing led to another. I mean, it's clear from my book I've never failed in life, not a single test at university, not a single examination. In fact, I have never even written a supplementary exam in my life. So I did well in life academically, and that encouraged me. From one university, I went to University of Fort Hare, which was my first university. I did well even at Fort Hare. I finished my degree, which was a B.Juris degree, my first law degree. I finished the degree within the record time. Then I went to the University of Natal. Remember, at that time, we still had apartheid laws in place, and the universities just were segregated. So I felt that even though I had achieved a lot at Fort Hare, the standard, the quality of education was not the same as at University of Natal. In those days, University of Natal, Pietermaritzburg, was a very, very good law school. It was a whites-owned university, but they were beginning to open up and allow black students like me onto the campus. It was obviously my exposure at that university which led me to going overseas now, where I did 2 degrees, a master's and a PhD degree at the University of Cambridge, and I thoroughly enjoyed my academic life overseas. I came back to lecture. I was an academic altogether for a period of 9 years, and then from the 1st of January 1995, I was appointed as a judge, and I remained on the judiciary for 29 years until I was impeached in March this year. The letter of impeachment was dated 6th of March 2024.
And for the most part, under your leadership in the Western Cape bench, race was definitely a big factor in that division. Even post you being removed from office, it was still palpable, even in the JSC interviews, that these challenges are still there. How much of a role or responsibility are you willing to take in the divisions that occurred in the Western Cape bench?
Well, as a leader, I think it would be unwise not to take responsibility at all. It would. So I'm willing to take vicarious responsibility, because ultimately, as a leader, I am responsible. But if you ask me, was there another way of addressing racism? I can't think of any. There is no elegant way of dealing with racism. You have to call racism racism. I am yet to come across someone who admits racism, by the way. You don't have to be aware of being a racist before you can be a racist, right? But you become a racist when you treat people differently because they are part of a different race group. That's racism, right? But there is no elegant way of dealing with racism, in my view. You just have to call racism racism and deal with the racists.
And looking at the stain that it has had on the bench so far and how it continues to carry its functions, there's nothing you would have done differently with respect to the racism report?
Absolutely. I considered various ways. There was nothing else that one could do. We were not prepared as judges to suffer in silence. Remember, the racism report, which I authored, was endorsed by other black judges, right? So there were short reports and concurring judgments, if you like, concurring reports that were authored by other judges. My experience, in other words, was shared by other black judges in the division. So it wasn't just the John Hlophe issue. It was not a pigment of my imagination. Very interesting. The issues of racism are still alive. That's why today judicial candidates for judicial appointment are almost inevitably asked questions relating to racism to test whether they subscribe to the new constitution, and especially the second level level of transformation, which is the mind and the mindset. Remember, transformation is twofold. It's about transformation with reference to race and gender, right? But there is a second level of transformation, which is the mind and the mindset.
Now let's move to chapter 8, which really is the crux of your journey. You head down to the Constitutional Court. You speak to two of your colleagues, justices there at the Con Court,
Yes.
regarding a matter that is ongoing, and there's a pending decision on that. What was your intention behind speaking to those judges?
I know both judges. Uchafta was a lecturer in my department when I was a professor at the university. I had visited him, we were chatting, and then in the course of the discussion, this was my evidence, which was never rejected, by the way. My evidence, which I gave openly, was never rejected. Yet there was a finding against me. I don't understand how that works. I've been a judge for 29 years. You've got to find reasons for rejecting evidence. The evidence that I gave was never rejected. I had gone to visit Judge Shafter, who was a friend of mine, and we had worked together. Even as judges, he was a judge president when I was also a judge president. As I walked into his chambers, it was quite impressive. I looked at this tint matter and so on. We started having a discussion about it, and I expressed my views. There is absolutely nothing wrong with a judge expressing his views. Judges are human beings. They talk about their work every day. I mean, as I was a judge, for example, in the Western Cape, it would not be uncommon for a judge during tea time to walk into the tea room and say, hey, Hlophe, the chap who appears in your court is a scallum. I believe you are sitting in that matter. It doesn't mean I must just go back to court and find him guilty on the basis of what the other judge said. Judges, like doctors, like pilots, like teachers, like journalists, we talk about our work. There was no suggestion that I gave them money or I promised them anything.
Well, the suggestion is that you were trying to influence the outcome, because we know the Constitutional Court to make those decisions as a panel.
Yes.
It's a court, it's a decision of the court, and that was the allegation that was made and upheld against you, that you were trying to influence those judges in that outcome.
That view is obviously nonsensical. I reject it with the contempt it deserves, and I will tell you what. At that point in time, Judge Jafta was an acting judge. So if I was intent on influencing them unduly or improperly, I had a golden opportunity, because on the same day I met with Chief Justice Langa. I went with Chief Justice Langa. We spoke about work that he had asked me to do as a head of court, unrelated to this matter. I did not even talk about this matter with him. So I missed the golden opportunity. If the thinking is that I was there to influence judges to find in favor of President Zuma, then the starting point with respect should have been engaging Justice Langa, who was Chief Justice of the court.
Well, the argument was that at the time they were still junior judges at the time, and could have been.
Well, it doesn't make sense. Why would I approach an acting judge in the hope that an acting judge would influence the other 10 judges? He was acting and not permanent. And Kabinde had just been appointed, Justice Kabinde. So it doesn't make sense. If I wanted to influence them to rule in favor of Zuma, I would have gone for the head. How do you kill a snake? You hit the head of the snake, not the tail.
At the time, you were touted to be possibly a prospective next Chief Justice. I mean, that's how people looked at your career. Why in that period would you have felt the need to comment on a political matter? We know that some judges like to stay out of that discourse. Why express those sentiments, knowing the sensitivities around how appointments are made in those very senior positions and how that could possibly be received?
Well, at that time, remember, the racism report let's deal with just two things. First of all, before the racism report, I was a darling of the legal profession. I was a darling. And even the late Chief Justice, Charles Carlson, said he has no doubt I will be a future Chief Justice. That's how I was viewed. Then things turned with respect when the racism report was made public. I was then accused, I was told I'm unstable, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm mad. Afrikaners said, yes, before I'm mad, right? That's what they said. So when this is now 2008, already at that time it was clear to me that the chances of becoming a Chief Justice had already been dashed by my racism report.
Mm-hmm. Is there a middle ground that is needed when you are acting in the position as a judicial officer to be fitting of a position of a judicial officer? Do you have to have that middle ground on sensitive issues such as race, etc.?
Well, if you are sitting in a matter as a judge, you don't take race into account. I wouldn't say, for example, I'm going to find against you because you're an African woman and I want to teach you a lesson. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't find against a white accused, for example, in court because I want to teach him a lesson because they stole our land, right? I'll give you an example. The chap Mboniswa, who killed Marike de Klerk in 2003, is out of prison now. I sat in that trial. He's a black chap, Mboniswa. He's Xhosa speaking. He killed the former first lady who was white, and the evidence was that she was racist. That was the evidence laid before me. I'm not swearing at her, but that was the evidence laid before me. Nevertheless, because crimes had been committed, I couldn't say, Mboniswa, hey, you're one of us. No, stay out of prison. I found him guilty and gave him life sentence. Indeed, he was released after 20 years. So justice is colorblind as a judicial officer, right? But it does not mean issues of race, we must turn a blind eye to them. You don't take that into account for purposes of finding against a litigant, but it doesn't mean you remain completely oblivious to issues of racism, because we come across racism in this country every day. Even 30 years after liberation, we are still being referred to by the K word in this country, by those who stole our land.
In hindsight, when you look at the circumstances that led to your removal, was it worth it? If you had a glass that would have shown you what the future would have looked like, would you have opted not to go to your colleagues and discuss a pending matter?
There is no struggle without casualties at the end of the day, right? It was worth it in the sense that I exposed the system, how rotten it is. The system is rotten. The judiciary now, in my view, is not the same as it was before, particularly under the ANC led by Cyril Ramaphosa. So on reflection, I don't regret. I lost everything. I lost money. Life is not about money, but it was a worthwhile. There is no struggle without casualties at the end.
You would have done it again?
I would have done it again. Zuma was being persecuted. I said that publicly. It was even said by I think, Advocate Mshe. He was, I can't remember what his role was before. I'm not the only one who said Zuma was persecuted. There are many high-profile individuals who have said that.
And now you sit today going from a legacy of being, the bright, promising legal scholar, transformative, historic appointment to the bench, to today just being reduced to the impeached Judge President of the Western Cape.
Yes, that's what the journalists call me.
Is that what you believe?
Well, I was impeached. I can't run away from that fact, but I've got better titles than Judge President. That's why I don't want to be called as judge. I'm Dr. Hlophe, and my doctorate is an academic one, right?
I don't know if you watched the process of your removal, specifically in the National Assembly. I mean, you watched majority of MPs debate adversely on your career, and 305, an overwhelming majority, voting in favor of your removal from office.
I can deal with that immediately. I didn't watch it on TV because it was disgusting, but my legal team, my family, my kids were watching it. There is no doubt that it was the DA that was behind my impeachment. The Democratic Alliance could not secure two-thirds majority without getting the ANC on board. right? And I have absolutely no doubt, had the ANC not been led by Cyril Ramaphosa, I would not have been impeached. In other words, it was the white-led DA and Ramaphosa's ANC that led to that. Some of them were voting, they are even scared to face me. And I'm in Parliament, some of them have told me stories that led to my being impeached, but I don't allow them to influence my thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, being impeached, it was very clear. If you look at how it was done, how it was orchestrated, it was political. There's no doubt about it.
You're now a member of Parliament for
Yes.
the Mkhonto weSizwe political party, which is essentially led by the former president. I remember when that first announcement was made, criticisms were made that these were your true political ambitions, and now it all makes sense. How do you respond to that criticism?
Well, let me put it this way. I've always been political. I've always been political. If you look at my writings before I was appointed, going way back in 1989, I started addressing the issue of land. I do not come from the ANC background. I'm more from the Pan-Africanist background, though I was never formally a member of the PAC. But I got my political education from the PAC people, right? So that opened up my mind about racism issues and so on.
But those Pan-African parties exist today, but you chose to join the MK linked to the former president.
Sure.
And of course, drawing links to the circumstances that led to your removal, where you spoke on a pending matter involving the former president, and now you are a member of that political party, and of course criticism drawing links between the two, that this now makes sense.
With respect, let me just deal with that briefly. There are few Pan-Africanist parties. The PAC has only one member of parliament. I could not have joined the PAC and be what? The local convener, so the PAC was out for me. DA was out for me. I would never have anything to do with the DA. It's a racist political party. The ANC was responsible for impeaching me for political reasons. The ANC was out. Where is Azapo? Azapo is basically not where. The EFF would have been an option for me with respect, right? But the events happened so quickly that when President Zuma litigated and wanted to bounce back and lead the party in parliament, no doubt that was his wish. The judiciary ruled against President Zuma. They said, no, you can't go back to politics because you're a former president. And then he had to look for someone. I don't want to mention the names of high-profile politicians that he approached. He told me some of those names, I will not mention them. And then eventually he decided to approach me. When President Zuma approached me, it was only after I was impeached and when it became clear that he could not go back to parliament. The MK party has 58 MPs. It had to be led by someone. And President Zuma, I've asked him many times.
We'll have more on that interview in later shows.